Hello, and welcome back to Roslyn, episode 9. So first off, I want to start off with just a quick apology. It's been a while since I've uploaded. That's due to, first, some major changes in my life, a big cross-country move, but also a technical challenge in that I recorded this episode without any commentary, and so I'm doing the voiceover sort of semi-live here with some notes to help me um, after the fact. So it's actually been a while since I recorded this footage, but I'm going to talk through what I did in this session, which I'm really excited about actually, because there's some really cool stuff in this episode. Primarily, the thing I'm most excited about is that we're going to be redoing our farmers market to try and get a much more realistic look. We'll also hit our next city milestone, and I think we'll even get into a custom plaza here. But just starting with an overview of the city, the first thing here after the bird's eye view is just to try and meet some of our RCI demand. So we're going to start with our classic fencing strategy here. For these 2x3 lots, you can see right across the street there, using the fencing to create those lots specifically so that we don't have homes of a bunch of different sizes zoning in all over these blocks. So I just like to go up and down and then come down the back here pretty simply. This seems to be the fastest way to get it done on a console at least. And it will help clean up too. If your grid is broken at all, this is a great way to help fix that up. So we might see a little bit of that later. But in Roslyn, we've just been working with these long blocks of 2x3 houses. Block length isn't necessarily set. It's been kind of touch and go, and there's a lot of diagonal crossing roads that are specifically there to help people get around and across the city. So there's not necessarily a uniform block size or block length, but there is a very uniform block depth, which is, as you can see here, is 7 squares with the fence down the middle square there. And when I'm doing this level of fencing, I absolutely will just leave the grid road guideline on, or fence guideline, I guess I should say, because that's how you get these nice clean lines. You could take the square or grid fence guideline off, and that would be fine. You can see here as well, I've also got other road guidelines, or I guess other fence guidelines popping up, and so that's what those dotted blue lines are. But yeah, so that just really cleanly created that little expanded that residential neighborhood. You can see I was just checking for water there. Always a good thing to do before you actually start zoning. And then here's my normal practice. It's very tempting with all that green down in the residential demand bar to just like do everything all at once. But I find that staying like a block at a time is a really good way to make sure you don't overzone. So here I'm considering how to meet some of that commercial demand. It's not quite as high as residential demand, but we should expect it to tick up now that we have a bunch of new houses zoned. And here you can see, I think I'm considering what to do with this farmer's market because I'm not very happy with how it turned out from a previous build. I love the idea of having a real farmer's market. The trick with it in City Skylines is that a lot of these buildings look extremely modern, which is fine and cute and would be lovely for a farmer's market, don't get me wrong. But it's not necessarily the look you'd see at a farmer's market, at least not most of the ones I've been to here in the US. So the first thing I'm doing here is breaking these blocks up because this is already a pretty major thoroughfare right here, Valley View and Grove Streets. Here I'm just patching in street names so they kind of make sense. But breaking up those blocks is a great way to create a lot of developable space here, especially because these are such short blocks. So what I decided to do was take all the zoning off of that block there. And I want to move the actual farmer's market proper into that first big block there, right across from the farmhouse. Because I think that's a really picturesque, scenic place for it. So It's also going to mean moving these pre-made park assets around eventually. For now, I'm just going to maintain pedestrian connectivity through here as sort of guidelines of where those blocks were. Over here, I'm going to be using the dirt paths, and that is because what I really want here is some of those farmers market stands that really look like they're just tents in the dirt. That just feels like so authentically. You can see there is one of them there. We'll get in more into the kinds of assets we're trying to get out of the build as we get into, you know, a game of whack-a-mole to try and get them to pop up. But right now, just laying out pedestrian connections. Obviously, like, you're going to see a lot of people coming in from those intersections, so it's good to give them space to actually do that. Here, we're just going to... I think originally I was going to create a separate district, but we're just expanding that residential neighborhood over a little bit, so that stuff will be considered part of, I think that's Lower Roslyn. And then we're expanding the Fairfield Farm district here because it is set up for a specialized commercial zone to create the farmers market buildings. So here you can see I'm deleting some of the more modern looking ones, the ones on concrete pads in particular. And then I'm just going to zone in some more commercial over here now that I'm sure this is all going to pop up as farmers market stuff. And then historicizing the buildings that we really want to keep. Now, I think because these are specialized commercial buildings, just checking on that residential growth there, they will not actually level up. They start out at max level, if I remember correctly. So really, the whole point of historicizing them here is not to prevent them from leveling up into something else, but just to make it more difficult to accidentally delete them. That's another nice feature of the historical designation, is that the game will give you a tooltip checking in to make sure that you actually want to get rid of that thing if you're going to build a road or a path over it, or if something else is going to happen that would otherwise cause you to delete it somehow. So you can see we've got some really nice dirt pad style, little tent style. I love this one with the picnic tables out front. You know, I love the ones with the tents out by the sidewalk as well. I've sort of waffled back and forth on this coffee shop. I don't hate it. I don't think it would be impossible to see something like that. Whereas it was really torn on this because it's concrete, obviously. But it's basically like made out of shipping containers, which does feel very sort of like what you might see at a chic little farmer's market kind of situation. You know, your really established business right there might just decide, okay, we're going to put down a couple of metal containers because it's easier than building something, but it's also nicer than the tents, and a little more hardy than the tents. So yeah, you can see these are just really, this first shipping container here has got windows all through it now, which is really nice. Yeah. And so then we see some bigger stores coming in. Again, I wanted to check out this coffee place, Burn Bean, from the ground level, and I don't hate it either because it is so basic and tiny. That's really, I think, why I decided to end up keeping it. That, and it's made out of wood, and we know that there is a big lumber industry in town, so it wouldn't be out of the question that somebody would want that made out of wood. Deleting that electric car parking lot, I know that is like the best way to fake parking in vanilla, but they just don't look like normal parking lots to me. And I just would rather have more tents here in this like square where we have the farmers market as opposed to some big electric car parking lot, even if it does maybe make the look a little more realistic. So you can see I'm kind of just now deciding what I really want to keep here, what sort of makes sense. You know, I'm not crazy about this shop right here, especially I realize it's like identical to that one right there. Some more of these like very modern looking like public market buildings coming in, which again is not like impossible that you'd see something like this. You know, it's why that in the back right corner there I decided to keep that, because that sort of like warehouse setup would be a great amenity to have if you were working this farmer's market. If you had perishable goods, something that has some cooler space inside it, maybe even a walk-in, could really make a difference for you at point of sale. Which is why I'm sort of like debating, what to actually get rid of here. Because all of this super developed stuff is coming in on the city side of the square here, but you can tell I'm just still not happy with what's coming in. I really want more of those tents so it feels less developed. Still kind of like the outskirts of town here a little bit. And even, playing with the size, the zoned area is a good way to try and get when you're not sure what is going to come in. Because I'm still, at this point, I'm not really. I know there's some 2x4s over there, and a couple of other like 2 deep zones that have like come in really. I'm happy with there. But as long as I still have like a good chunk of commercial demand down to that RCI meter, it's no problem to just delete stuff and wait for it to come back in as something you're happy with. You can use that surplus RCI demand to sort of toy around and play the whack-a-mole game and get the buildings you want, because if you let that demand drop all the way to 0, nothing might come in. Certainly it won't as quickly. You can see we got another little tent stall there, I'm happy with. Excuse me. So trying to figure out what could actually happen here, because this coffee shop is taken up to across there and blocking out the whole back of that row of zoning there, leaving me a 1 wide space. Here I'm anticipating this is going to be something I'm happy with, whereas these big ones here, again, it's just like I want to take it down to street level and see how they're coming in. That's a car lot. That's probably going to go. This is like a big sort of warehousey thing. Yeah, you can already tell I'm not happy with that. Here we're just going to try and zone some more lots in. Obviously our residential demand didn't really go down at all. And then I'm thinking about a park in here. A dog park right across from that school there might be nice. Something just to add a little bit of extra leisure value to this area, especially as this residential development continues down into these blocks that are empty right now. See a great pedestrian utilization of that cut through right there. Back out by the farm, just kind of doing some checks, getting a little bit distracted maybe. And there we had an industry area level up. That was our timber industry on the other side of town, which we'll check in on probably in a couple of episodes here. Good to know it's leveled up. Give us a chance to, we'll have some stuff unlocked. Here I love this 3 deep, 1 wide spot that's coming here. Again, like very natural wood, picnic tables. It adds a couple of trees into this space, which we don't have right now. We'll want to landscape this, but it's tough to start landscaping before you know what all is going to be here and what you're going to be working around and trying to emphasize or trying to play down. Really thinking about landscaping as a tool aesthetically, but also in terms of noise, which it has a mechanical use in the game that way. You can dampen loud uses with landscaping. Really want to be deliberate and know what we're working around when that comes in. And now we're just playing with some of the park life assets to see if we can't continue to flesh out the feel of this space. These green tents are really handy if you want to create any sort of farmer's market type of vibe, even without the specialized commercial zone there. Yeesh. Yeah, I didn't like that. But this did also remind me it's actually a good opportunity to um, really properly establish this area as a park, because that's going to have a lot of benefits in terms of gameplay. Um, Creating an actual park zone here, um, which is currently called Summit Brook, just because we used the nature reserve main gate because it feels sort of the most rustic and appropriate, I think, for this setting. You can toy around with some of the other gates. I think the zoo and the amusement park gates are a little the zoo's okay if you want a modern look. The amusement park is very specific. You can see that nature reserve gate there has a very rustic look to it. Here we're just renaming the park, and the city park gate is fine for most things. I just want that sort of like dirt road feel through here. So I went ahead and went with the nature preserve gate, which you can see that. So that's going to add a parking lot in, which I really like. Because another thing I'm not crazy about here is that for some of those 2x4s on the far side there, you can see the parking is on the inside, which doesn't make a lot of sense in terms of the geography of this place, but that is fine. You know, if I wanted to come back through here again and try to get all the tents on the right side, or maybe put a dirt road down the middle somehow, those are options. For sure. There, I just changed that to the nature reserve path because the dirt path was not connecting up correctly. There was some kind of glitch there where you could see that gap. Here I'm just toying with I want the one with lights on it. No, I like that one just fine. I don't want to put that all the way throughout because I don't think having a ton of big rocks over a high pedestrian traffic area like that really makes a lot of sense. It's different on a hiking trail for sure. But here there's going to be people cutting in and off the paths pretty much everywhere. So having a couple of rocks, you know, you could sit there and wait for your friend on a rock maybe, or something like that. Not a big deal, but I did not want that throughout the whole farmer's market. There we can see there's a dirt lot coming in, so we're going to go ahead and keep that. And now just looking at some more of the park assets to see how we can sort of continue to build this place up and increase its value so that as it gets more visitors eventually, it can level up and add more value to the homes around here. Oop, and there is our milestone for Busy Town, so that unlocks quite a bit. A lot of policies, a lot of new roads, some new buildings, a lot of park stuff. Some unique buildings, very cool. I like a lot of those creator content pack ones. They're very plain and simple and not ostentatious or so unbelievably high. Here we can have another dirt lot coming in. Gonna go ahead and snag that real quick. I don't know why the scaffolding goes so high on those little tents. It's very funny. You can see that one came in with the picnic tables out front again, which I love. Decided not to keep that. I'm thinking instead about, you know, maybe what we could put in there. So deciding maybe we want to do a little plaza back here. And just finding the right surface for that, which I think in this case is going to be the city park surfacing. Now these are incredibly tricky to use on console, and I don't recommend it unless you have an immense amount of patience. I mean, once you get that first one down, it definitely becomes a simpler thing. As you can see, they will snap right in with each other, but if that first one is misaligned at all, and you end up diagonal to your path or something like that, it's going to complicate things immensely. You can see here, I'm just deciding I'd rather have a path kind of come in down on the side of this. Even if it's not properly connected up, it is going to create more of a sense of flow over to that spot there. So you can kind of walk over to those tents back and forth around the plaza here. And then just playing with some more of the... Oh, and there's the park level up. Is that this park? I missed it. I'm sorry. You can see that takes out our surfacing there, so we don't want that. It'll just come right back, but we do have a nice little spot right here that would be cute for a good little fire gazebo, I think. Just checking a couple things. Oop, and there we have an issue. We're short on some power. And so, because I got plenty of money in the bank right now, I am just going to drop down to Geothermal Plant. I don't really know enough, and some of the things I've seen recently, I think City Planner Plays just did a video about how these geothermal plants, or maybe it wasn't him, I don't remember who it was, they're actually pretty rare in most places, except maybe like Scandinavia. But for my money, there's just not a more space efficient way to do clean energy in this game. I mean, I love the windmills, but the size of the wind farm you need for a major city is like an entire square unto itself. Here we're just expanding sewage capacity. You can see that's riding the line of the yellow there. So since we have this sewage treatment plant set up already, might as well just expand it. Yep, that looks good. You can see I put the geothermal plant there next to our coal plants. That's because eventually, you know, we'll be extending these city service blocks out, I'm thinking. So while I'm here, I'm like, might as well just hit recycling as well, expand that. Since it is riding on the red now in the yellow. So just drop 2 of those down there. And that'll just clean up our utility needs very briefly and simply. And I'm not going to detail these just yet. I think we'll get into that in another episode. The other thing about the windmills is that they are, you know, there is like a proximity penalty in this game. If you place them too close to each other, they will impact each other's efficiency. However, it is nothing compared to the kind of spacing you might see in a lot of places. You know, I just mentioned I made a cross-country move coming on the drive all the way through Iowa and Nebraska. Those windmills are all through the fields now, and they have vast distances between them. Okay, here I am contemplating a new tile. You can see, as much as excited as I am about the orientation of this city, what it's going to mean long term, it is very complicated with the tile layout here, unfortunately. Because I'm not actually squared up to my starter tile, I went at a diagonal in anticipation of expanding along the shoreline there. It makes it very difficult to figure out which tile to pick next when there's only one available. So we'll come back to that in a while, I think. So just checking in, our residential demand has remained fairly high. We'll go ahead and zone in another block here of what we set up at the start of the video. And then just coming back, you know, I historicize that. I'm happy with those shipping containers, I think. I'm not crazy about the fact that it's a big bite, if I'm being honest, but, you know, maybe the farmer's market got away from itself a little bit, its roots already, or maybe Big Bite was a big sponsor of this entire project, and so, you know, they agreed to do a shipping container, a repurposed shipping container setup for the sake of the aesthetic and maybe a building code on the farmer's market here to keep it from getting overdeveloped. There's a lot of ways to think about how that might have happened. Here, I love these nature reserve benches. Not only, I think, are they a very simple, cheap-looking design, they also work really well as parking blocks, I think. As you can see, I use them in that little lot next to those tents there. I'm really happy with how that looks. And then I'll just intersperse them because, again, we can sort of play off the idea that that timber industry that we saw level up might also have, contributed to making this farmer's market a reality. Um, and a simple way for them to do that would be to produce a bunch of cheap benches. So people can actually come and sit and enjoy, what they're purchasing, if it's something for now, or take a break before they walk home if they're buying a bunch of stuff for later. And then here I am just adding in some lighting. So one thing we're not going to see in this episode, I don't think, is how the farmer's market looks at night. But it's very easy when you build a park like this, if you're not using paths that have lights on them. It's easy to forget how dark it's going to get. And there are a lot of public safety implications for good lighting. But it's also just, at night, we don't want this to just turn from like a purely aesthetic angle. We don't just want this to turn into a dark abyss of light at night if we're going to play the game in day-night mode, which I normally like to do, but I'm not, because I want it to look nice on YouTube, and nobody wants the dark night footage while I'm trying to build. I think eventually it would be nice to do maybe a whole episode about nighttime in the city. Maybe once we develop our first nightlife district, we could do something like that. Just spitballing. But so this is just detailing now. Benches, lights. We'll get into some more here in a little bit. We can see quite a bit of pedestrian traffic coming through right there. Interesting that they kind of took the long way to come through the farmer's market. There's a big bus stop right there, which we like to see. Here we're just going to make sure this plaza is lit up, and so is this parking lot behind the Big Bite, that again I have no idea how you would actually drive into. I guess maybe on the side there. It's a little chaotic back through here, the mixed-use pedestrian vehicular traffic, but I think we can live with it. Obviously, if this was PC and I had mods, and I could control traffic on specific roads, we could just put a big dirt road down the middle of this and turn off all traffic except maybe emergency vehicles, and then have that be a sort of major pedestrian thoroughfare down the middle of the farmer's market with maybe some paths branching off of it to get to other little shops. Don't feel like you have to restrict yourself to okay, I'm going to turn this block into a farmer's market. If you have a really picturesque spot, maybe with a view of the farm, or sort of on the outskirts of town that you're not sure what to do with, a big sort of farmer's market development can be a really fun way, if you're willing to sit through the sort of whack-a-mole game, to create a very unique looking feature on the outskirts of your town. So here we're just adding in some picnic tables. I like these folding tables for the farmer's market because I think it looks like something, these vendors might bring themselves, so that when they're taking a break, when their workers are taking a break out behind their stall here, they have somewhere to sit down. Not necessarily for public use so much as, especially if they're bringing their kids and you need to sit your kid at the table with a coloring book or a Game Boy or something like that. Just to create some space that's really more for the vendors and their staff. And same thing with these folding chairs. Again, something the vendors could bring with them. And something that you would see a lot of at a lot of U.S. farmers markets is these cloth fold-up chairs. Because for space efficiency in the car and in the garage, they're hard to beat. So just trying to put them sort of out back of the stalls here. It's not super realistic when we get up very close to it, because each one of those stalls, I guess maybe the dumpsters are further back, but there are a lot of dumpsters on this lot, which is a little unrealistic as well. I'm not super wild about. I get that the game's mechanics probably needs to assign dumpsters to each of these things, but somewhere like this, I wouldn't be surprised if there were maybe a couple of dumpsters in one quasi-central location, and everybody just had to dump their stuff there, because your trash guys aren't going to want to stop at every single one of these little tents to pick up trash after the farmer's market. Here we're putting in a sign so we can make that well maybe look a little historic. maybe try to create the implication um, that this was all land that belonged to that farm across the road at one point, and that was their well here on the outskirts of the old town. Um, Deciding I don't like these tables, and that I want to free up some space to really go super custom with this plaza. So the way I'm going to do that is with some flower beds. Um, Again, maybe this was something that the farmer's wife was very passionate about, was her gardening. And so, you know, this area that maybe once was a garden for her is now this elaborate farmer's market for the whole community to enjoy. Could have been donated. And now, of course, the best part, we're going to add in some trees. Keep it in mind that this is a tropical map. I'm going to try to mix in sort of an assortment of tropical trees, as well as I think there will be some deciduous in here as well. But you can see with the vanilla trees we can actually expand our sandy areas in an interesting way, so that, you know, the lots don't feel quite so squared off even. Then of course when we get into the I think the new downloadable vanilla trees from the creator content pack, that's going to create a very different ground profile, which is fine. It's nice actually to be able to mix trees that create a sandy patch underneath them with those that don't, because we don't want to get rid of all the grass here, right? It's not bad to have a little bit of grass. But just dropping in some of those big palms, some nice oaks here. I love these live oaks. I know they've become quite popular, I think. Just looking at some of the other trees here. The California palm, that's a nice one. And doing this as well, because you could just see in that shot there briefly, that farmer's market across the street does have these vanilla palm trees in it. So we're going to try to mix some of those in as well. You can see there it sort of helped blend out the sandy area just a little bit. Again, just using them sparingly. We're not going to see the sandy parts on the ground very much, to be honest. But there we create a nice little shady spot back there. And do some more right here. You can already see, I think, it looks a lot. The trees make such a big difference. So let's take it in for the ground level view, huh? Got a nice young professional right here, taking a walk. She's going to grab some coffee as she comes up to the farmer's market. You know, that place would be an institution, if we're being honest. Maybe she'll come back here, sit down, drink her little cup of joe, say hi, meet up with some friends, decide, you know, oh, do you want to get something right there? No, let's go for a walk down here, see what's new first. Yeah, again, those dumpsters I'm not crazy about, but, you know, overall, I think this looks really nice. Be a nice place to come on a Saturday morning, Sunday morning, pick up some produce, you know, maybe some meat if there's a good meat vendor in town. Certainly grab coffee and some breakfast, sit here at the flower beds, enjoy that. Bring your family, bring a date. Great date spot right here, I think. So yeah, thanks for checking out episode 9. Oh, sorry, I'm getting a call real quick. Hey, yeah, can I call you back? I'm just trying to finish up the episode. Okay. Yeah, so come check out episode 10 next. Thanks, bye!